The stars looked different through the observation window of the Zenari diplomatic vessel Lyra had seen. Thousands of them during her centuries of service, but today they seemed colder. Somehow she pressed her slender blue hand against the transparent metal and wondered if the newest species they discovered would be friend or foe. Ambassador, we're approaching the human vessel now, her aide said softly. Zenari rarely spoke loudly. When you could hear thoughts, voices seemed almost unnecessary. Lyra turned from the window and smoothed her diplomatic robes. She was considered one of the finest telepaths in the galaxy, able to sense not just emotions, but entire thought patterns. The Galactic Council had chosen her specifically for this mission because humanity worried them. These newcomers had spread across dozens of star systems. In barely 2 centuries, their ships bristled with weapons, their history files showed nothing but war after war. After war, the Council needed to know if humanity would bring that violence to the stars. The human ship called the Endeavor hung in space ahead of them. It was smaller than most diplomatic vessels, but Lyra could see the weapon ports along its hull, defensive. The humans had claimed everything was always defensive with them. Prepare for boarding, Lyra commanded. Her team of 3 accompanied her across the docking bridge. The Hunan captain had agreed to this meeting, though the transmissions had been tense. Humans didn't know about telepathy yet. The Council had decided not to tell them until after the assessment. The airlock opened with a hiss. Lyra stepped into the human ship and immediately felt overwhelmed. Emotions crashed against her mental shields like waves against a cliff. Fear, curiosity, anxiety, hope. It took her a moment to sort through them all. Tall human male with graying hair and sharp eyes approached. He wore a dark blue uniform with symbols of rank on his shoulders. Ambassador Lyra, welcome aboard the Endeavor. I'm Captain Jake Morrison. He extended his hand. Lyra had studied human gestures. She took his hand and shook it, noting the firm grip and the calluses on his palm, a warrior's hands. She opened her telepathic senses wider, preparing to read his surface thoughts, and hit a wall, not a hostile barrier, but something else, something she'd never encountered before. It was like trying to see through fog. She could sense emotions clearly enough, but his actual thoughts remained frustratingly unclear. How strange. Thank you for meeting with us, Captain, Lyra said. Recovering her composure, the Council is eager to establish formal relations with humanity. We're eager too, Jake said, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Let me introduce my crew. He walked her through the ship's main corridor, and Lyra met one human after another. Lieutenant Commander Helen Brooks, the science officer, a woman with tired eyes and a careful way of speaking. Danny Cruz, weapons officer, young and trying too hard to appear confident. Lisa Grant, the medical officer, with soft hands and a worried expression. Every single one of them had those same mental walls. Lyra had encountered species with natural telepathic defenses before, but those were always conscious barriers, built with knowledge and intent. These walls felt different, instinctive, unconscious. The humans didn't even know they had them. During the formal dinner in the captain's mess, Lyra sat across from Helen Brooks. The science officer was explaining something about Earth's ocean systems, but Lyra was barely listening. She was carefully, gently Probe at the edges of Helen's mental defenses. Ambassador Helen had stopped talking. "Are you all right? Forgive me," Lyra said quickly. "I was simply fascinated by your description. Please continue." But she didn't stop her telepathic exploration. She pressed a little harder, finding a gap in the unconscious barriers. Just a tiny opening, but enough. She slipped her awareness through it like water finding a crack stone, and suddenly she was drowning. Thoughts and emotions flooded through the connection. Lyra gasped and nearly pulled back entirely, but she forced herself to remain steady. She sorted through the chaos, trying to understand what she was sensing. Helen was worried, deeply worried, but not about the Zenari. Specifically, she was worried about what the galaxy thought of humanity, worried that first contact would go wrong, worried that her captain was taking too many risks by allowing aliens aboard, worried that her sister back on Earth would be in danger if the diplomatic mission failed. Beneath all that worry lay something else: protectiveness. Helen was running through scenarios in her mind, calculating what the crew would do if the Zenari proved hostile. Not attack plans, escape plans, evacuation routes, ways to get the ambassador safely off the ship while warning Earth about potential danger. Lyra carefully withdrew from Helen's mind, her hands trembling slightly. She picked up her glass of water to cover her reaction. "The Zenari don't drink water, do they?" Danny Cruz asked from down the table. "I mean, we read that you folks process moisture differently." "We do drink," Lyra said softly, "but not as much as humans require. Your bodies are fascinating, actually. So much water, so fragile, yet so resilient." "Fragile is right," Jig said with a laugh that didn't sound entirely amused. "We're pretty aware of how vulnerable we are. Out here, it's a big galaxy, and we're the new kids." Vulnerable, that word stuck in Lyra's mind. She turned her attention to Jake, pushing her telepathic sense toward him more boldly. Now, his walls were stronger than Helen's, but she'd learned the trick of it. She found the gap and slipped through. Jake Morrison's mind was a storm of tactical calculations. He was aware of every person on his ship, their positions, their skills, their families. Back home, he was tracking the Zenari vessel's position, analyzing potential threat vectors, noting the nearest planets with human colonies. But underneath all that military thinking was something Lyra hadn't expected. Jake was terrified, not of the Zenari hurting him, but of failing to protect his crew, of making a mistake that would doom humanity's chance at peaceful contact, of leaving his daughter without a father. If this went wrong, she pushed deeper and found a memory rising to the surface. Jake tucking a little girl into bed, no more than 7 years old. "Daddy, are the aliens going to be nice?" she asked, and Jake lying the way parents do, saying, "I'm sure they will be, sweetheart, and if they're not, that's okay, we'll handle it, we always do." Lyra pulled out of the connection abruptly, her breathing fast. She looked around the table at all these humans, with their weapons and their walls and their careful politeness. The council thought they were hiding aggression, but that wasn't it at all. They were hiding fear and determination. They expected the galaxy to be dangerous, because everything in their history had taught them that strangers often were. So they'd built walls in their minds. Without even knowing it, they'd armed their ships and trained for combat and calculated escape routes, not because they wanted to fight, because they were absolutely convinced they'd have to. "Ambassador Lyra," Jake said, breaking her Thoughts you seem troubled is. Something wrong, Lyra looked at him. This human captain with his warriors. Hands in his daughter's bedtime. Stories, no Captain Morrison, she said. Quietly, I'm simply beginning to understand something important. But she wasn't sure yet if that understanding would be enough to save them from the council's judgment. The council chamber was enormous, carved from a single asteroid and polished until the walls gleamed like black mirrors. Lyra stood in the center, her report displayed on holographic screens around her. 12 representatives from different species watched her with varying degrees of interest and suspicion. So you believe the humans are not a threat, said Counselor Van, a methane breathing creature whose translated voice sounded like wind through caves. Despite their weapons, despite their military structure, despite their violent history, I believe they are defensive, not aggressive, Lyra replied. Carefully, their mental patterns show protective instincts, not predatory ones. Mental patterns you claim to have read through natural defenses they don't even know they possess, said War coordinators. The Kryn representative was tall and muscular, his gray skin marked with ceremonial scars. How convenient that you can interpret their thoughts however suits your argument. Lyra's chest tightened with frustration. I have served this council for 300 years. My assessments have never been questioned. Before, you've never assessed a species with this level of military capability. Before, Fex shot back, Ambassador, I don't doubt your skills, I doubt your interpretation. Fear and aggression look very similar in the mind. A predator hunting and a predator cornered both show the same patterns. The other council members murmured agreement. Lyra felt the tide turning against her. Then allow me to go deeper, she said suddenly. Let me establish a full telepathic link with one of the humans, a true mind merge. I'll be able to understand their intentions with absolute clarity. Counselor Viven's tentacles rid in a gesture Lyra had learned meant concern. Such a link is dangerous, Ambassador. If you're wrong about their nature, you could be compromised, turned against us. I'm not wrong, Lyra said firmly, and I'll prove it. The council debated for another hour before finally agreeing. They would allow the deeper scan, but Lyra would have only one chance. If her findings still didn't convince them, humanity would be quarantined, contained, prevented from expanding, until they proved themselves peaceful. Over several generations of isolation, the pressure of that decision followed Lyra back to the Endeavor like a physical weight. Jake Morrison looked surprised when she explained what she wanted to do. You want to read my mind? Like really read it, see my memories and thoughts and everything? Yes, Lyra said. It's the only way to convince the council of your intentions, but I must warn you it will be invasive. You'll feel my presence in your consciousness. Some species find it deeply uncomfortable. Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring out the observation window at the stars beyond. Finally he nodded. If it helps humanity, I'll do it. When do we start now, if you're willing? They sat across from each other in the observation deck, the stars providing the only light. Lyra had sent everyone else away. This needed to be private, intimate, in a way that other species would never understand. Just relax, Lyra said softly. Don't try to think of anything specific. Let your mind wander naturally. Jake closed his eyes. Lyra reached out with her telepathic sense, finding the walls. His mind again, but this time instead of slipping through gaps, she asked. Permission, she felt his consciousness. Recognize her presence, and after a moment of hesitation, the walls began to lower. Lyra dove deep. She fell through layers of thought and memory, like falling through water. Surface concerns gave way to deeper patterns. Jake's mind was organized like a military operation. Everything categorized and filed away. But Lyra pushed past the organization to the raw emotions underneath. Fear, so much fear, but not selfish. Fear, he was afraid for his crew, for his daughter, for humanity itself. Every tactical plan she found, every weapons drill, every combat scenario was built on a foundation of desperate protectiveness. If the galaxy proved hostile, Jake was determined that humanity would at least survive long enough to run. She found memories of his training years ago, an instructor telling a room full of young officers that humanity had learned a hard lesson from its own history. The strong always tried to dominate the weak. The only way to ensure survival was to be strong enough. That conquest seemed too costly. She felt Jake's response to those words, his determination to be that strength for people who couldn't protect themselves, his hope that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy would be different than Earth had been, his resolution that, even if it wasn't, humans would face whatever came with their eyes open and their defenses ready. Lyra went deeper, still past the military training, to the man underneath. She found his daughter, Katie, and hundreds of memories, teaching her to ride a bike, helping with homework, reading stories at bedtime, and always the underlying current of wanting to make the universe safe for her. One memory surfaced, stronger than the others. Katie had asked him why he was going to space. Because someone has to meet the aliens first, Jake had said, and I wanted to be someone who will try to be their friend even if it's scary, someone who will protect Earth if things go wrong, but who really hopes they won't. Lyra felt tears on her face, though she wasn't sure when she'd started crying. She pushed even deeper to the core of Jake's being and found something she hadn't expected: hope despite everything, despite all the fear and the walls and the weapons. Jake Morrison hoped that the galaxy would accept humanity. He hoped they could be friends with the Zenari and the Kryn and all the other species. He hoped his daughter would grow up in a universe where different civilizations worked together instead of fighting each other, and beneath that hope was a promise: if the galaxy gave humanity a chance, he would spend his entire life making sure humans proved worthy of it. The depth of his sincerity overwhelmed her. Lyra pulled back, breaking the connection with a gasp. She opened her eyes to find Jake staring at her with concern. Are you okay? He asked. Immediately, did something go wrong? Lyra laughed, the sound coming out half like a sob. No, Captain Morrison. Nothing went wrong, everything went right. I understand now. I truly understand. Understand what? Your species. You're not preparing for conquest. You're preparing for survival because you're absolutely convinced you'll need to. Every weapon, every defensive measure, every tactical plan is built on the assumption that the galaxy will eventually try to hurt you. She met his eyes. But you're hoping desperately that you're wrong. Jake's expression softened. Yeah, that's about right. We've been hurt before as a species. We've hurt each other, so we know how bad it can get. We're ready for the worst. He paused, but we're reaching our hands out anyway, hoping for the best. You're protecting yourselves while trying to make friends, Lyra said. It's extraordinarily human. Is that going to be enough for your council? Lyra thought about FCKS and his suspicions about the other council members and their fears about how hard it would be to convince them that strength and gentleness could coexist in the same species. I don't know, she admitted, but I'm going to try. Jake stood and offered his hand again. Lyra took it, and this time she felt the connection without needing telepathy, a simple understanding between two beings who wanted the same thing, peace and the strength to protect it. The council chamber felt smaller, this time more oppressive. Lyra stood in the center again, but now she carried the weight of everything she'd seen in Jake Morrison's mind. She had to make them understand humanity's future depended on it. I have completed the deep telepathic link with the human captain, Lyra began, her voice steady despite her nerves. I have seen the core of human consciousness, their motivations, their deepest intentions. And what did you find? Counselor Van asked. I found a species that has been shaped by violence but chooses peace. They arm themselves not for conquest, but because their entire history has taught them that being unprepared means extinction. Every human on that ship is ready to fight, yes, but only to protect, only to defend. War Coordinator Feck stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across the chamber floor. Ambassador Lyra, but I must present evidence that contradicts your assessment. Holographic displays appeared around them, images of human ships with massive weapon arrays, tactical databases showing invasion plans for dozens of star systems, training programs that taught humans how to fight in zero gravity, how to breach hostile ships, how to neutralize entire planets if necessary. This is not a defensive species, Fex said coldly. This is a species preparing for war. They have the capability to destroy any one of our civilizations. They have plans already drawn up, and you want us to believe they'll simply choose not to use them. Those plans are contingencies, Lyra argued. Every species in this council has similar databases. We all have defensive scenarios not like this. Fex pulled up more data. Humans train their children in combat sports from a young age. They glorify warriors in their entertainment. Their most popular stories are about conflicts and battles. Violence is woven into their culture at every level. Lyra felt the council's mood shifting. Fear was spreading through the chamber like a cold wind. I have seen inside a human mind, she said desperately. I have felt their thoughts. They don't want war. What they want and what they'll do are different things, Fex countered. Every aggressive species in galactic history has claimed to be defensive right up until the moment they attacked. The Scourge said they were just protecting their borders. The Hive Collective said they were only ensuring their survival. Both times we believed them, both times. Millions died before we could stop them. The silence that followed was heavy. Lyra knew what they were thinking, how many civilizations had to die because the council gave someone the benefit of the doubt. Counselor Viven's tentacles moved in a pattern that meant sorrow. Ambassador Lyra, your passion for this species is noted, but we cannot risk the safety of the entire galaxy on your interpretation of one human's thoughts. The evidence, the X presence is too compelling. Then what will you do? Lyra asked, though. She already knew the answer. We will vote on containment. Vin said humanity will be restricted to their current systems. They may not expand, may not establish new colonies, may not build more military vessels. This containment will remain in effect for a minimum of 200 standard years, during which they must demonstrate peaceful intentions through action, not just words. 200 years, Lyra whispered. That's multiple human generations. You're imprisoning an entire species for crimes they haven't committed. We're protecting the galaxy from a potential threat, Feck said. If humanity is truly peaceful, they'll understand the necessity. The vote was called. One by one, council members cast their decision. Lyra watched the count with growing horror. 10 votes for containment, only 2 against. It was over. Lyra returned to the Endeavor in a state of numb shock. She had failed. Despite everything she'd seen, everything she'd felt in Jake's mind, she hadn't been able to convince them. Jake took the news with quiet dignity. He stood on the bridge of his ship, looking at the stars through the main view screen, and simply nodded. I understand, he said softly. They're afraid of us. Can't blame them for that. Our history probably looks pretty scary from the outside. This isn't fair, Lyra said, her voice breaking. You haven't done anything wrong. Fairness is a luxury, not a right, Jake replied. We learned that a long time ago. He turned to his crew. Set course for Earth. We need to deliver this news to command. His crew moved to their stations, their faces carefully blank, but Lyra could feel their emotions: disappointment, anger, resignation, and underneath it all, that same protective instinct she'd sensed before. They weren't thinking about revenge or how to break the containment. They were thinking about their families, about how to make the best of a bad situation, about how to keep humanity safe within their new prison. Lyra stood on the bridge, feeling more helpless than she'd ever felt in her 300 years of life. She had dedicated herself to building bridges between species, and now she'd watched as one was burned before it could even be completed. Incoming transmission, Helen Brooks said suddenly. It's from a Kryn vessel. Emergency frequency. Everyone on the bridge tensed. The Kryn were the Council's military force. Had they come to enforce the containment already? Put it through, Jake ordered. The view screen changed to show a Kryn commander, his face twisted in panic. Any ships in range? This is Commander Drax of the patrol fleet. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Multiple vessels down. We need immediate assistance. Coordinates attached. The transmission cut to static. Then images appeared. Ships that looked like nothing Lyra had ever seen. All twisted metal, and organic components were tearing through Kryn vessels like they were made of paper. Energy weapons that seemed to eat matter instead of just destroying it. Helen was already working at her station. Those are devourer ships. They were supposed to be extinct. The database says they're a hive mind species that consumes all biologic matter in their path. How far away? Jake asked quietly. 4 hours at maximum speed, Danny Cruz reported from weapons. But, Captain, the Council just voted to contain us. They're not exactly our friends right now. The bridge went silent. Lyra could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone present. The Kryn had just condemned humanity to 200 years of isolation. War Coordinator Theeks himself had led the charge against They had every right to turn away, to let the council that feared them face this threat alone. Lyra watched Jake's face. She didn't need telepathy to know what he was thinking. She'd been inside his mind. She'd felt his core beliefs. Someone had to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, even when they didn't deserve it, even when they'd been cruel, even when it cost everything. Jake took a deep breath and turned to his crew. Helen, plot a course to those coordinates. Danny, prep all weapon systems. Lisa, prepare medical for combat casualties. He paused, meeting each person's eyes. Anyone who doesn't want to do this, I understand. You can leave the bridge right now. No judgment. Nobody moved. They voted against us, Helen said quietly, and people are dying. Damn right, Danny added, his hands already flying across his weapons console. Lyra felt something crack open in her chest. She'd thought she understood humans, but watching them make this choice, seeing them move without hesitation to help those who condemned them, she realized she'd only scratched the surface. Captain Morrison, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Why? Jake looked at her and she saw in his eyes the same thing she'd felt in his mind during their connection, that desperate hope, that fierce protectiveness, that fundamental belief that doing the right thing mattered more than being treated right, because this is who we are. Jake said simply, this is who we've always been. The Endeavor turned toward the battle, its engines glowing bright as it accelerated to maximum speed. Lyra stood on the bridge and realized that whatever happened next, the Council's entire understanding of humanity was about to change. She just hoped they'd all survive long enough to appreciate it. The battlefield was chaos. The Endeavor dropped out of faster than light travel into a scene of destruction. Burning Kryn vessels tumbled through space, trailing atmosphere and debris. The Devourer ships moved through the wreckage like sharks through water, their organic holes pulsing within sickly green light. 3 Kryn vessels still operational, Helen reported, her voice tight. 8 destroyed. Devourers have 7 ships active. Captain, we're outnumbered. Then we better be smarter, Jake said calmly. Danny, target the lead Devourer ship. Helen, get me a comm link to the remaining Kryn vessels. Lyra gripped the railing near the captain's chair. She could feel the tension on the bridge, the fear mixed with determination, but there was no hesitation. These humans had made their choice, and now they were committed completely. The view screen flickered, showing a Kryn commander. She recognized War Coordinator Fex himself, his face covered in what looked like blood. Human vessel, you need to retreat immediately. These creatures are beyond your capability. With respect, Commander, we didn't come all this way to watch, Jake replied. We're an LT Unc and GT, going to help whether you want it or not. Now, do you want to coordinate our attack or waste time arguing? Theek stared at him for a long moment. Behind him, Lyra could see his bridge shaking from weapons fire. Your weapons won't work on them the way you think. They absorb energy. Conventional weapons just make them stronger. Then we'll use unconventional ones, Jake said. He turned to Danny. Switch to kinetic rounds, old-fashioned bullets in missiles, nothing energy-based. Kinetic weapons. Fex looked surprised. Those are primitive. Your ship carries those. Humanity learned a long time ago that sometimes the old ways work best. Helen, send our tactical database on the Devourers to all cringe ships. Everything we have on their biology and vulnerabilities. Helen's fingers flew across her console. Sending now, Captain, the database says. Their hive mind depends on a central consciousness ship. If we can identify and disable it, the others will become disorganized. Can you find it already? On it, the Endeavor shook as a devourer. Ship fired on them. Danny returned fire immediately, and Lyra watched in fascination as simple metal projectiles tore through the organic hull of the enemy vessel. The Devourer ship recoiled, green fluid leaking into space. It's working, Danny said with grim satisfaction. These things don't know how to handle physical impacts. All Kryn vessels switch to kinetic weapons. If you have them, Jake ordered, focus on physical damage, not energy-based attacks. The Kryn ships following Jake's advice began landing more effective hits, but the Devourers were adapting, focusing their attacks on the Kryn vessels instead of the Endeavor. They're trying to eliminate the Kryn before dealing with us, Helen said. Captain, the damaged Kryn cruiser is about to be destroyed. They're targeting it with 3 ships. Jake didn't hesitate. Move us between them. Full shields forward, Captain. That will leave our rear vulnerable, Danny warned. Do it anyway. The Endeavor surged forward, positioning itself directly between the Devourer ships and the damaged Kryn cruiser. Energy weapons that would have torn through the Kryn vessel's failing shield splashed against the Endeavor's stronger defenses. Instead, the ship shook violently. Alarms blared across the bridge. Lyra was thrown against the railing, her telepathic senses suddenly overwhelmed by the pain and fear of the crew. But nobody left their stations. Nobody panicked. Hull breach on Deck 7. Someone reported emergency bulkheads holding shield strength at 40%. Danny called out. We can't take much more of this. We don't need to take much more, Jake said. Helen, tell me you found that consciousness ship. Got it. Sending coordinates to your station now. It's hiding behind the asteroid cluster at bearing 273. Danny, prepare a full kinetic missile barrage everything we have. Helen, coordinate with the Kryn fleet. We get one shot at this. Lyra watched as the humans worked with perfect efficiency. Despite the chaos around them, despite the very real possibility of death, they moved like parts of a single organism. And she realized that this was what they'd been training for their entire lives. Not conquest, not domination, but this exact moment when protecting others required perfect execution. Kryn fleet will provide covering fire. Fire on my mark, Jake said. He waited, counting down in his head. Lyra could feel his focus, his absolute certainty. Mark, the Endeavor released every kinetic missile in its arsenal. Dozens of metal projectiles streaked through space, following trajectories calculated to perfection. The Kryn vessels added their own fire, creating a storm of metal and explosive force that converged on a single point behind the asteroid cluster. The Devourer consciousness ship never had a chance. The explosions lit up space like a new sun. When the light faded, the consciousness ship was torn apart, its organic hull shredded and leaking into the void. And just as Helen had predicted, the other Devourer ships immediately began acting erratically. Without their guiding intelligence, they were just animals, dangerous, but without coordination, the remaining Devourers are retreating. Fex's voice came over the comm. They're withdrawing from the system. He paused, and Lyra Could hear something in his voice she'd never heard from a CR before, humility. You saved us. Your ship saved my fleet. That's what friends do, Jake said. Quietly, how are your casualties? Heavy. We have wounded on all vessels. Our medical facilities are overwhelmed. Jake looked at Lisa, the medical officer. She nodded immediately. We can take their overflow. Our medical bay is ready. Over the next several hours, Lyra watched as the Endeavor took on wounded Kryn warriors. Human doctors worked alongside their own medical AI to treat injuries they'd only read about in textbooks. Lisa moved through the medical bay like a dancer coordinating care for species with completely different biologies. Lyra found herself helping where she could. Her telepathic abilities allowed her to sense pain and distress, helping the human doctors prioritize the most critical cases. She worked next to Helen, who'd left the bridge to assist with medical supplies. 17 of our crew are dead, Helen said quietly as they worked. Good people, they knew the risks, but still, why did you come? Lyra asked. Your council condemned you, and you still came. Helen was quiet for a moment, her hands steady as she helped stabilize a wounded Kryn soldier. My sister is 8 years old. She lives on Earth. I came out here partly to make the galaxy safe for her. If I'd let those Kryn die just because they were afraid of us, what kind of galaxy would I be creating for her? The simplicity of it struck Lyra. Helen hadn't made some grand moral calculation. She'd simply asked herself what kind of universe she wanted her sister to grow up in, and acted accordingly. War Coordinator Fex came aboard the Endeavor personally. His arm was bandaged and he moved stiffly from injuries, but he walked through the ship with his head up, looking at everything with new eyes. He found Jake on the bridge reviewing damage reports. Human captain stood when Fex entered. Commander, Jake said formally. How are your people alive? Because of you. Fex moved closer, and Lyra felt something shift in the Kryn warriors. Consciousness, shame, deep shame. I condemned your species for being too dangerous. I argued that your military capabilities made you a threat to the galaxy. I convinced the council to imprison your entire civilization. Jake didn't say anything, just waited. I was wrong, Fex continued. You could have left us to die. You had every right to. We had just voted against you, restricted your freedom, imprisoned your species for crimes you hadn't committed. But you came anyway. You put your lives at risk to save ours. He paused, his voice rough. I've been a warrior for 300 years. I've seen many species, many civilizations, but I've never seen anything like this. Like what? Jake asked quietly. The strength to choose peace from a position of power, the wisdom to know that capability for violence is not the same as desire for it. You are dangerous, Captain Morrison. Make no mistake about that. Your species is perhaps the most dangerous I've ever encountered. Fex met his eyes. But you're dangerous to the right things, too. Threats and cruelty and injustice, not to innocent people who are simply afraid. Lyra felt tears on her face. Again, she watched as the proud warrior who had condemned humanity lowered himself in a gesture of respect she'd never seen a Kryn make before. On behalf of my people and my fleet, thank you, Fex said, and I'm sorry. Jake helped him back up. We're even now. Commander, let's focus on getting everyone home safe. As the left bridge, Lyra moved to stand beside Jake. Through the view screen she could see the Damaged vessels limping toward the nearest station for repairs, the council. "We'll hear about this," she said. "Everything will change now," Jake nodded. "Slowly maybe, or maybe they'll just be grateful we happen to be nearby. People see what they want to see." "You're wrong," Lyra said firmly. "They'll see what I show them, and what I show them will be the truth." She thought about Fex's words, dangerous to the right things. That was humanity exactly. They carried the capacity for immense violence, but they directed it at threats rather than innocence. They built walls and weapons and defensive plans, but only because they cared so deeply about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. They weren't peaceful because they were weak. They chose peace because they were strong enough to do so. The council chamber was different this time. The same 12 representatives sat in their places, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Where before there had been suspicion and fear, now there was uncertainty and something else, something that might have been shame. Lyra stood in the center once again, but this time War Coordinator Theek stood beside her. His presence alone spoke volumes. The Kryn were the Council's military force, their warriors, their protectors. To see their War Coordinator standing with humanity instead of against them shifted the entire dynamic of the room. "Councilors," Lyra began, her voice steady and clear. 3 days ago you voted to contain humanity based on fear of their capabilities. 2 days ago, humanity proved exactly why that fear was misplaced. Holographic displays appeared, but these weren't the threatening images Thex had shown before. These were recordings from the battle, the Endeavor positioning itself between Devourer ships and damaged Kryn vessels, human doctors treating wounded Kryn warriors, Jake Morrison coordinating with the fleet. Instead of claiming command, the humans received your judgment, Lyra continued. They were condemned to 200 years of isolation. Generations of their people would live and die in a prison you created for them, and hours later when your military fleet called for help, they came without hesitation. Counselor Ven's tentacles moved in patterns LRA recognized as distress. "We have seen the battle recordings. The human vessel sustained significant damage protecting our forces. 17 humans died," Feek said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Seen members of their crew gave their lives to save mine, to save Kryn warriors who had just voted to imprison their species." He paused, and LRA could feel the weight of his words. "I have been a warrior for 3 centuries. I have fought beside many species, against many enemies, but I have never seen anything like what the humans did." War Coordinator, you were the primary voice arguing for containment, another counselor said. "What changed your assessment?" "I was wrong," Feck said. Simply, the admission clearly cost him. But he didn't flinch from it. "I mistook preparation for aggression. I saw their weapons and their training and assumed they sought conquest. I didn't understand that a species could be both powerful and peaceful, that they could carry the capacity for violence while choosing to use it only in defense of others. They could have left us to die," he continued. "Instead they risked everything to save us. That is not the action of a species that seeks domination. That is the action of a species that understands what true strength means." Lyra pulled up more recordings, not just from the battle, but from her time on the Endeavor. Jake reading his daughter's messages, Helen worrying about her sister, Danny, practicing with weapons while hoping he'd never need to use them. Lisa, preparing medical supplies for potential casualties, her hands gentle despite her military training. I have been inside. Human mind, Lyra said, I have felt. Their thoughts, their fears, their hopes, and I'm telling you that humanity is not a threat to the galaxy. They are a gift because they understand something we have forgotten. What is that? Counselor Van asked softly. That peace is not the absence of weapons. Peace is the choice to set those weapons aside. Even when you're afraid, humanity is afraid of us. Counselors there, terrified. Their entire history has taught them that strangers are often enemies, but they're reaching out their hands anyway, offering friendship despite their fear. Lyra felt her voice breaking with emotion. They're braver than any species I've ever encountered. Not because they're fearless, but because they're afraid and they choose kindness anyway. The chamber was silent. Lyra could feel the shift in consciousness, the way the council members were reconsidering everything they thought they knew. I would like to speak, said a new voice. Holographic image appeared, transmitted from the Endeavor. Jake Morrison, standing on his damaged bridge with his crew around him. Counselors, I appreciate Ambassador Lyra's defense of my species, but I want to be honest with you about who we are. Captain Morrison, Counselor Venn said, you have earned the right to address this council. We are dangerous, Jake said bluntly. Lyra and Commander Fex are right about that. We have weapons, we have training, we have contingency plans for conflicts we hope never happen. And yes, if you threaten us or the people we care about, we will fight back with everything we have. LRA tensed, worried that Jake was undermining everything she just said. But he continued, but here's what you need to understand about humanity. We've seen what happens when the strong prey on the weak. We've lived through it. We've been both victim and perpetrator. We've made terrible mistakes and paid terrible prices for them, and we've learned from all of it. Jinx's image turned, gesturing to his crew. Every person on this ship chose to risk their life for people who had just condemned us. Not because we want the council to like us, but because it was the right thing to do. That's not unique to us. That's what we teach our children. That's what we value in our culture. That strength without compassion is just brutality, but compassion without strength can't protect anyone. Helen stepped forward on the holographic display. My sister is 8 years old. She asked me before I left Earth what aliens would be like. I told her I hoped they'd be kind, that I hoped the galaxy would be a place where different species could be friends. She paused. I'm out here trying to make that hope real. We all are. Danny appeared next. Yeah, I know how to use weapons. I'm good at it, but you know what I'd rather be doing? Playing guitar, writing music, maybe falling in love someday. Fighting is something I'm trained for, not something I want. One by one, members of the Endeavor's crew spoke, each one sharing their story, their hopes, their reasons for being in space, and Lyra felt the council's understanding deepening with each testimony. We're not asking you to trust us blindly, Jake said finally. We're asking you to judge us by our actions, not your fears. Let us prove ourselves. Give us a chance to be the friends we want to be. The council chamber was quiet for a long moment. I moved to reverse the containment order. Fex said suddenly, humanity should be welcomed into the Galactic Council as Full partners, not probationary members. They have earned that right. Another counselor spoke, seconded, then another. And another. Counselor Viven's tentacles moved in a pattern of agreement. Let us vote, all those in favor of welcoming humanity as full members of the Galactic Council. Lyra watched as one by one every single counselor voted in favor. 12 votes unanimous. The motion passes. Then announced, humanity is hereby welcomed into the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. The containment order is rescinded. Ambassador Lyra, please convey our decision to Captain Morrison and his crew. Lyra felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they were tears of joy. 3 days later, Lyra sat in the observation deck of the Endeavor as the ship made its way back to Earth. Repairs had been completed, and the crew was preparing for their homecoming. Through the window she could see Earth growing larger, a blue and green marble. Against the darkness of space, Jake found her there, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He'd learned that while Zenari didn't need to drink much, Lyra had developed a taste for the human beverage. Thought you might want this, he said, handing her a cup. Thank you. Lyra took a sip, enjoying the warmth. Your planet is beautiful. Yeah, it is. Can't wait to see my daughter again. Katie's probably going to have a million questions about aliens. Jake smiled. What am I supposed to tell her? Tell her the truth, Lyra said. Tell her that we're not so different. We're all just trying to do our best in a big, scary universe. Some of us are just better at being brave than others. I don't know if we're brave, Jake said quietly. Most of the time, I feel like we're just making it up as we go along, hoping we don't mess everything up. That's what bravery is, Lyra replied. Doing what's right even when you're scared and uncertain. You showed the galaxy that humanity can be trusted, not because you're perfect, but because when it mattered, you chose to protect instead of punish. You chose kindness over revenge. Jake was quiet for a moment. You know what the funny thing is? I'm glad the council was afraid of us because it means they're cautious. They think about consequences. They don't just trust blindly. That's the kind of galaxy I want Katie to grow up in, one where people ask questions and demand proof before accepting strangers, even when those questions hurt. Even then, better to earn trust than to demand it. My daughter asked me once what I thought aliens would be like. I told her I didn't know, but that I hoped they'd give us a chance to show them who we really are. He smiled at Lyra. Thank you for giving us that chance. Lyra reached out with her telepathic sense one last time, gently touching Jake's consciousness. She felt his thoughts clear and bright. He was thinking about going home, about seeing Katie, about all the ways humanity and the Zenari could work together, about building something beautiful in that galaxy, and underneath all of it, that same protective instinct she'd felt from the very beginning. The determination to keep his daughter safe, to keep Earth safe, to keep the galaxy safe from threats and safe from humanity's own darker impulses. You asked me once what I discovered, Lyra said softly. When I first felt your thoughts, I remember I discovered that you've been protecting us from the moment we met, protecting us from your weapons by keeping them sheathed, protecting us from your fears by hiding them behind walls, protecting us from yourselves by choosing diplomacy over force. She met his eyes. You've been protecting the galaxy from the very beginning, Jake Morrison, long before we Knew we needed it, Jake didn't say anything, but she felt his gratitude. Through their light connection, as the Endeavour approached Earth, Lyra knew that everything was about to change. Humanity would take its place among the stars, and the galaxy would be better for it, not because humans were perfect or peaceful or without flaws, but because when humanity saw someone who needed protecting, they stepped forward without hesitation, even when it cost them everything, even when they were afraid, even when they've been hurt. They protected because that's what friends do, and the galaxy had just gained the most loyal friend it would ever know.